the best test pilots in the world.
Here?
Yeah. They got some kind of a little brotherhood. They keep thinking they got the right stuff.
What do you mean, what kind of stuff? You mean heroism, bravery?
Heroism and bravery are part of it, but seems to be more to it.
Hello, and welcome to another episode of Hollywood Gold. I'm your host, Daniela Taplin-Lundberg, and I'm here with my right-hand woman, Becca Camerata. Hey, Bex.
Hi, Daniela. How are you?
I'm so excited to be interviewing the legendary Phil Kaufman about The Right Stuff, which was based on the Tom Wolfe book about the rise of the space program, as well as Chuck Yeager and him being one of the most incredible and brave test pilots of all time. He broke the sound barrier and was just such a badass in his day, still is. I heard a lot about Chuck Yeager growing up because my dad and my stepbrother were obsessed with him. So he is truly a legend. And this movie I watched again over the weekend, and it really is just one of the greats. I'm not sure it could get made today in the way that it was. It's really like watching poetry, but God, what a movie. What a movie. And I think it was maybe nominated for 8 Academy Awards and won like 3 or 4. So really, really was a great movie. But another example of a movie that just didn't make humongous box office and then just has gone on to be one of those films that people talk about all the time. So I'm excited to hear the tale from Phil.
Yeah, let's get into it.
Okay. So the great Phil Kaufman.
It's so great to see you because I knew you before you were born.
Oh, it's so nice to meet you. And I've heard about you for years and years, and I've been a huge fan of your work. And, you know, the whole premise of this podcast is to talk about the great legacy films. And The Right Stuff is one of those. It's a film that anytime it's mentioned, people have such a reverence for it and such a love for it. And so first off, Phil, I want you to, you know, my husband gave me this note. I want you to tell us what The Right Stuff is. What is the premise of The Right Stuff? Can you sum it up?
Yeah, no, it's funny that you should ask that because after the film was made, Tom Wolfe and I was in New York, and we went to be on the Today Show with Brian Gumbel, and we were sitting there side by side, and Brian Gumbel sort of was fussing with things, and then suddenly somebody said, "We're on camera," and Brian Gumbel said, "Phil Kaufman, what is The Right Stuff?" I was stymied for a minute. You know, I wanted Tom Wolfe to answer that, but he looked at me with a smile. He had a white suit on and smiled. And I sort of thumped for a while, and I said, you know, The Right Stuff is an ineffable quality. You can't just come up with a definition of it. In fact, in the film we've made, every scene is some sort of manifestation of the qualities of the right stuff or what the right stuff isn't. In a way, the whole film is sort of a tale of the adventures of a quality that is defined in the course of the movie in large part by, as Tom Wolfe discovered, this unknown to the public character of Chuck Yeager, who was the man who broke the sound barrier, but who was unknown to the public at the time. Everybody knew the astronauts and all of that, but there was a quality of, I don't know, what do you say, modesty, of getting the job done, getting the task done, doing what needs to be done without a lot of fuss and bother, because that's what needs to be, I think, in some ways restored in the American world. The Right Stuff, in a way, bringing the Western into the modern world. It's the cowboy meets the test pilot meets the astronauts. But that quality was something that it's not that it's fragile, it's that it's sort of the Holy Ghost of the American spirit, which is hovering around out there, but is often in danger. And I guess everybody could say, particularly in our times, of being lost by braggadocio, bravado. And the problem is that even in films that we sort of have lost some of that daring authenticity, truthfulness. It shouldn't be created by bragging or publicity. It should be there. And it's something that every true actor understands, because actors, there's something truthful when they're cooking, when they're given the opportunity. They are in touch with an aspect of what I would call the right stuff. It happens with writers, but not often enough. It happens with, as you know, as a producer, you wait for that right project. You hope it comes along, and it, maybe it isn't always there. But sometimes you hope when it passes by or when it's hovering in the air that you can grasp it and do something with it and manifest it into a film or a song or a story or a poem. And these are something that's elusive and yet in some ways ineffable. So when you ask me what is the right stuff, it's very hard for me to specifically say exactly what that quality is.
Well, I mean, you've answered that beautifully. So let's go back to the beginning. Phil, how did you encounter the book, Tom Wolfe, the story? Who brought you into it?
Yeah, I was initially contacted by Bob Chartoff and Irwin Winkler. They were friends with Tom Wolfe, and they had bought the rights to the book. And they brought on William Goldman to write the screenplay.
Who's a legendary writer.
Yes, one of the best known screenwriters in the world. I was a friend of Bill Goldman's, or so I thought. And when suddenly I was offered to do the right stuff, first of all, I had some reservations.
To direct it, Phil, or to write and direct it?
Just to direct.
Okay.
Bill Goldman had written the script.
Okay.
I had some questions. I read the book, and I felt that the script left out a very important key element, which was the right stuff. It didn't have the right stuff in it. They had made some decisions to do, I thought, a kind of hokey, conventional story about the astronauts. And, there was no Chuck Yeager. Bill had written some, and he was great at doing, Butch Cassidy was a historical, semi-historical thing. That was a lot of fun. I loved it and so forth. He had the astronauts being in a Mexican whorehouse and John Glenn rescue. I mean, it was stuff that was, I think he had a certain wariness or even disdain for Tom Wolfe's book.
Interesting.
And Bill Goldman had written a script, and he just wanted to see that done. Just do my script. And I said, well, fine. I just don't want to do that. And I got up and I said, I think we need to do, put the right stuff in. I think we need to have Yeager there. I think we need to have that spirit brought to the astronauts and so forth. And I was really feeling great about it. And essentially, Bill Goldman just walked out of the meeting. He wanted his script shot. He didn't want any of this so-called director bullshit.
Oh, my God.
Suddenly, I felt once again that I was in that sort of Hollywood thing of, let's just knock something out. We've got it. It was hokey. I remember John Glenn, the real John Glenn, had thought it was Laurel and Hardy in outer space when he read Goldman's script.
Were Winkler and Chartoff supportive of you, or were they like, we just let the biggest screenwriter in Hollywood go?
Yeah, they were, particularly Bob Chartoff. They called me a week later and said, Bill quit. And I said, well, what are you going to do? And I think the answer for the moment was, we don't know yet. And so I was sitting there up in my house in St. Helena, thinking, well, am I going to do this or not? It turned out they went with me. But, you go out, you suit up, and you try to break the sound barrier if you can. I mean, it's something called the right stuff. And I believed in the movie we were making, and I believed in what Tom Wolfe had discovered or described or brought to us. And I believed we could make a movie out of that theme of what you or what your husband said, what is the right stuff? And I wanted to live by that feeling.
Yeah, it was your lighthouse. It was like your beacon, which is like so helpful when you just know what it should all draw back to.
Right, exactly.
So you then were tasked with adjusting that screenplay, or did you start from scratch, or what did you do to get the script in the right place?
Yeah, so actually, when I got up in that meeting and argued for Chuck Yeager and for making a movie about the right stuff, and I argued passionately, but in fun. I mean, I thought we were having the greatest time. I essentially outlined the movie that I saw so that when Goldman quit and they came back to me, I wrote the script in about 8 weeks. They asked me to write it. I mean, I knew where the script was because we fought it out, or because I articulated it in that meeting.
And was Wolfe with you? Like, were you consulting with him, or did you just have his book and you were just sort of?
Well, I actually wanted him to write the script, but he, I met with him once or twice, and he said, I'm not a screenwriter. You write it. And, jumped to after he saw the movie. Irwin Winkler showed him the movie when it was done. And I wasn't there, but I guess as soon as it finished, Tom Wolfe said, wow, that was great. Let's look at it again. That moment when Chuck Yeager, Sam Shepard, comes riding on the horse, the Western guy riding across the desert, and he sees that X-1, that little plane, like the Bronc that can't be broken, just sitting there smoking in the desert, and you realize it's going to be man versus machine, and who is going to control. That's the theme of the movie. It's the cowboy.
I'm getting the chills. Yeah.
And the toughest critic in some ways is the writer of the original material. I went through that with Unbearable Lightness, with Neil Kundera, or Richard Price on The Wanderers, or James Houston on The White Dawn. You try to please, you try to get to the truth of things, and you hope you can please please the maker.
I marvel because, I do a lot of development myself, and working from a text like that, it's not a natural 3-act, right? Like, it's not a traditional arc of a film. And so to me, it works so well, and it really does feel like, in a way, you're watching a traditional film. But I can't imagine wrestling that information into a shootable script. So just talk about that a little bit, because to you, it may have been easier.
Yeah. No, that's an interesting thing. I'm not necessarily someone who believes in the 3-act thing. I think that's borrowed from the theater. In film, I think the thing is essentially to find a way to bring a scene to a certain point so that we want to know what's next. It's all about what's next. Some of the best filmmaking now is on television, really. I mean, I think some of the, whether it's starting with The Sopranos or going to Breaking Bad or Better Call Saul, they don't, maybe within the framework, they're doing some of the 3-act stuff, but they really are extending characters and episodes and themes onward, and they don't even know in the second or third or fourth season what they're going to be getting into.
Right.
They go back to their original material. They rethink it. It's incredibly exciting. I hope it continues, because I unfortunately see a lot of the wrong considerations now coming into television to become more formulaic.
Yeah.
And I think that what I'm talking about, or what we're talking about here, is finding, the spirit how do we find, what is Moby Dick? Moby Dick is a quest. It's a
journey.
But it also has endless chapters about the nature of whales. It has, talking about, things that mariners are concerned about. It is maybe the greatest American novel, and yet it's sort of fell into oblivion for a long time because it wasn't that formulaic thing. So I don't know, I respect all of those things about acts, and sometimes they're appropriate on certain things, but I'm also interested in how do you create characters that we want to live with or, in a sense, inhabit? Do we want to be that person? For me, from the beginning of film, did we want to be Charlie Chaplin, or did we want to be James Cagney? There was a thing when I used to go to movies, double bills, when I went all the time as a kid, where we walked out after the movie and we walked in a cocky way, like we were Jim Cagney, or what you see in when Jack Nicholson gives a great performance, you're intoxicated by that. And there's so many great actors right now. I don't think they're fully getting the chance to do what they want to do. And I love comic books, and I tried for years with Gareth Wigan to suggest that there should be comic book movies, and Peter and I were going to do the first Marvel movie, and everybody was saying nobody wants to see comic book movies, nobody wants to do it. I remember, we had Gareth Wigan in San Francisco, and I said, there's this Marvel character, and Marvel hadn't done any movies. There was a guy named Avi Arad who was running Marvel, and even Gareth, everybody said no. Conventional wisdom was no, that's not going to be commercial. Well, that's all there is now.
Well, it's just like art and life imitating. It's like you were a cowboy, right? Like in a way you were pushing the limit. I love that metaphor that you, in a way, we're, if you're trying to push boundaries and create things that are new, you're like Yeager. You're just you're pushing against convention. And I love that so much, Phil. And I'm very inspired by that.
What's that supposed to mean?
Well, it just means that you boys don't need no honest-to-God pilots. What you ought to get is a little old lab rabbit to curl up inside your damn capsule. With his heart going pitter-patter and a wire up the kazoo.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1, ignition.
Let's jump a little bit. How did the film get set up? There's no major stars, although all those actors went on to just profound greatness and were so talented. But it didn't feel like you were hanging your hat on Redford or something like that, right?
Right. No. So what happened was it was set up at United Artists, and we were having these conversations about how to do the film with Goldman and so forth. And right about that time, there was a film called Heaven's Gate that was made by United Artists.
Heaven's Gate, didn't it sink the studio?
Heaven's Gate was actually a very interesting film, but Michael Cimino was doing. It was said to be out of control and running wild in the same way that maybe Apocalypse Now before had been doing. And suddenly there was this sense of directors running wild or costs going too far. Anyway, United Artists backed away suddenly from the right stuff. And Bob and Irwin brought it to the Ladd Company and Gareth Wigan. But the Ladd Company was interested in making it if it could be done for a lot less money than they'd talked about. When it was first set up, everybody was talking about, let's go to Cape Canaveral. Let's do it in the traditional big Hollywood way. Make a big movie out of it. And my background was independent, low budget films. I was, when I made Goldstein, there were like, 4 or 5 independent filmmakers in America, Cassavetes, Shirley Clark, Curtis Harrington, very few people were making small movies and shooting on the streets. So my background was, independent films and how do you do things creatively and how do you make do? So the thing was, could we do this for a budget? The task then was, number one, to show how we could do it. So I said, we'll use a lot of documentary footage.
Sure.
So I got my friend Walter Murch, who maybe, greatest of all editors.
Yep.
And we started looking at all of the documentary footage. A lot was on 35, a lot was on 16, and worked at Coppola Zoetrope. And Walter and my son Peter were editing all the 35 millimeter film, and I had my 16 millimeter film, and we showed them how all this footage could be used. We put together long reels of this stuff, and then we had to do a storyboard to show, because Laddie wanted to know, what's it going to look like? So we had storyboards made of the film, and thousands of frames of storyboard. We spent months and months telling the whole film on storyboard, and then we went down to present it to the Ladd Company, and we had put the storyboard up in I think there were 2 or 3 rooms with the whole storyboard, and I up on the walls, and we showed the footage we had put together. But just as I was about to go through the storyboard thing with my big pointer, Laddie got a phone call, and he said, I got to take this phone call. Gareth, will you tell me what's going on here?
No, stop.
And he never came back. And I went through, spent an hour or two, couple hours going through the whole story for Gareth. Anyway, we made a budget, and they made a budget. Somebody made a budget, and they decided to go ahead with it.
Okay, so you've got your budget. You have not cast yet. You haven't scouted. Give me the nuts and bolts of that, how you brought the production together.
So forget what the maximum amount was, but all the astronauts, nobody would get beyond a certain amount of money. I don't remember what the figure was.
Well, Tony Howard, who I've just closed a deal with for a movie I'm making, was your casting director. Do you remember that?
Yeah.
Yeah, she just said, I just kept saying we have no money.
Yeah, we have no money. And nobody got over a certain amount of money. And she was great, by the way. I think Kim Stanley might have been the first person we cast.
Oh, interesting.
But then when it came to, maybe I could read something to you, if you don't mind.
I love it.
A number of years ago, I gave a talk. This was before the Magic Theater, where Sam Shepard had been.
Yeah.
Harris, and Fred Ward and Peter Coyote, and all these people had come out, and they asked me to give a little talk about why Sam Shepard has the right stuff.
Tell me. I mean, I thought he was so incredible in that role, just a quiet strength.
Here's a little bit of what I said. I was writing the screenplay for The Right Stuff. In his book, Tom Wolfe kept talking about a certain quality, a quality that could never be mentioned. Quote, there was something ancient, primordial, irresistible about the challenge of this stuff, no matter what sophisticated and rational age one might think he lived in. Perhaps because it could not be talked about, the subject began to take on superstitious, even mythical outlines. A man either had it or he didn't. There was no such thing as having most of it. The man who truly had it could ignore the rules. He would challenge all the limits. This quality was a kind of righteousness, but underneath it, there was this elusiveness. And all I could think about was, how do you visualize elusiveness? Right about then, Rose and I went to the Intersection Theater when it was over on Union Street to hear Sam Shepard read his poetry. There he was, this tall, string bean kind of guy in a leather jacket reading that elusive poetry. Afterwards, Rose said, well, there it is. Sam's your man. Yeah, but they'll never go with him down there. Down there, you know where down there is for us, Daniela, yeah.
Yeah.
To which Rose replied, Sam's your man. So I said to Sam, how'd you like to be in The Right Stuff? And Sam said, no thanks. And I said, how come? And Sam said, not my cup of tea. Sam bid me good night, and that was that.
Wow.
And Rose said, Sam's your man. So,
literally inhabiting Yeager as he's rejecting you. That is amazing.
And this is pure Rose, where she just would say, she knew, and she was sticking to her. And by the way, Sam was one of the most attractive men ever in my life.
Yeah, he really was.
So I saw Sam again, and I said, how come again? And Sam said, well, I don't know. Maybe it's because I hate flying.
Oh, my God.
You're scared of flying, I said, and Sam's eyes got that kind of mean, snaky look. I didn't say I was scared of flying, and then he was gone. And Rose said, definitely your man. Sam's staying at the Chateau Marmont down there. And so I get the room next to his, and I slide the script under his door, and I wait there in the hallway of the Chateau Marmont.
Stop.
The script slide the rest of the way, and I hear the envelope being ripped open. Next day, I see Sam, and he says, you want to get a bite to eat? So we go next door to the Imperial Gardens, back then in the early days of sushi, to that same restaurant where Henry Miller used to hang out when he was looking for Hokie or Brenda Venus. But that's all another movie. And so anyway, Sam says, okay. And I say, okay, by okay, you mean yeah? And Sam says, I'm your man, maybe.
Oh, my God.
So anyway, I tell the people down there, and they say, we'll never go with him. And I say, but he was so great in Days of Heaven. And they say, so what? It didn't perform. And I say, what do you mean? It performed fine for me. And they say, we're talking profits. And I say, profits? We're talking about The Right Stuff here. And they say, you want to go into turnaround? Turnaround is a word they use down there. I've been in turnaround plenty, and the feeling you get in turnaround is the feeling that Lot or Orpheus must have had when they got put into turnaround down there. But I said, I don't want turnaround, but I want Sam. Sam's my man. Well, miraculously, they folded. They said, you got to get him for a price. I said, I'll get him for a price. I felt kind of like a bounty hunter, but I'd always seen The Right Stuff as a kind of Western. As I was leaving, I overheard someone saying, if it doesn't work, we'll get that putz later. But that's another story. So I rushed to tell Sam he's my man. And even before I can get him for a price, he says, well, I've been thinking it over. And there's just this long pause. And I say, what does that mean? You've been thinking it over, Sam. Does it mean you don't want to do it? And Sam says, I didn't say that, but maybe I ain't this guy. Sam, you're this guy. You're my man. Maybe. Next thing, I arrange a meeting with Chuck Yeager, the ace of aces.
Oh, wow.
The only man who truly has the right stuff. General Chuck Yeager is, as Tom Wolfe describes him, a short, wiry, but muscular little guy with a tough-looking face that seemed to strangers to be saying, you best not be looking me in the eye, you peckerwood, or I'll put 4 more holes in your nose. Now, apparently, Yeager had not taken too kindly to Tom Wolfe's description of him, and he's adopted a kind of wait and fucking see attitude. We're in a loft south of Market where the models are being made and the storyboards are up on the walls. Sam doesn't show up. General Yeager arrives right on time, but Sam's nowhere to be seen. Yeager's pacing around, giving me his famed peckerwood glare when finally Sam arrives and says he must have overslept or something, which I guess is why Sam didn't get to comb his hair or shave or anything like that. Sam, meet General Chuck Yeager. Sam towers over Yeager, and I get the feeling that Sam doesn't particularly like the part about the general as he looks down and says, how you doing?
Oh, God.
Sam's got this snaky-eyed look, and Yeager's got his peckerwood glare. General pulls me off the side and says, you Hollywood guys. What do you mean, you Hollywood guys, General? Just like I figured, this guy ain't me. He ain't even close. He'll become you, General. This guy's a great writer. You ought to read his stuff. I tried to, not my cup of tea. He's an actor. He's going to become you, General, in a sort of Gary Cooper kind of way. I can tell Gary Cooper strikes a soft spot with Yeager. And while he's digesting that, I bring him over to Sam, who's gotten absorbed in the storyboard pictures. And I say, right here, this is where Sam Yeager breaks the sound barrier. And Yeager says, say, Ridley, make a note, will you? There's something wrong on this old accommodator. It's gone kind of screwy on me. Sam's perking up a little bit. He doesn't have that mean, snaky look anymore. He's got kind of bemused, snaky look. And he says, that really how it was, Chuck? And Yeager says, that's kind of how it was. And then he adds, those Hollywood boys always got to take a few liberties here and there. And Sam says, yeah, they do. And I'm kind of quiet thinking, I really don't need this shit, when suddenly Yeager opens up. But I understand all that. They got to sell their product. I never expected back then that the ace of aces, the unsung hero, was going to be all over TV selling Delco batteries and other products after the film came out. But that's another story. In this story, right then, Yeager said, you see, Sam, this here's how it really happened. And Sam leaned in, and right then there something clicked. And pretty soon the two of them were talking away with one another, going from picture to picture.
Oh.
If I were Tom Wolfe, I might have said what was going on here was, quote, ancient, primordial, irresistible. But truth to tell, I was just feeling kind of relieved that they were hitting it off. More truth to tell, I was also feeling kind of left out. So that's pretty much the way it was between Sam and Chuck from then on. Best of friends, mutual respect. It was like Sam had found the father he always wrote about to go along with the other one that was out there somewhere in the Southwest, the elusive one. Anyway, so.
Oh my God, Phil, I'm crying. I don't know if I'm just emotional, but that is so beautiful. And that's like the dream, right? If you can just put two people in a room and take away all the bullshit and just let them connect, then often like magic happens and you manage that. That's great directing, great producing, all of it. Oh, that's amazing. What a story.
They really make another note here, would you? Must be something wrong with this old mock meter. Jumped plumb off the scale. Gone kind of screwy on me.
The government spends just all kinds of time and money teaching new pilots how to be fearless, but they don't spend a goddamn penny teaching you how to be the fearless wife of a test pilot.
So this is so great. That Sam Shepard story is amazing. Do you remember anything from the shoot that felt particularly notable or hard, or was it a pretty smooth experience? Tell me.
It was all very, very tough.
All fraught. Okay. Okay.
Look, I had done a little bit before that. I'd done a film in the Arctic, which could not have been tougher, with blizzards and snowstorms and dogs and death and all sorts of things that went on. Films, are an adventure, and they can be really, really tough. But I remember Caleb thinking of what a perfectionist he is. We were shooting down at Edwards Air Force Base, and we had this great parched earth place. I think it was where the X-1 first appears. And we told the whole crew, don't walk on this dried desert. We don't want any tracks there. We want a pristine landscape. And of course, somebody didn't get the message. And Caleb and I are driving out there to the edge of this desert, and we see a car starting to venture onto this landscape. And Caleb leaps out of the car, goes running up to the car, leaps on the hood of this car, and starts jumping up and down, stopping the car. Don't fuck up my shot.
Oh my God. Oh my God.
I mean, he could have been killed, but that's what you want. I mean, Caleb was, you risk your life for a shot, but it's making the basket at the end of the game. Caleb would take the 3-point shot at the end of the game to win the game. And that's what all these things, I mean, the actors, they went all the way. I mean, Dennis Quaid, who was, I still can't watch Dennis Quaid movies that much because I just think of him as my young guy. I mean,
yes,
he was pure and wonderful.
Oh, that bravado and that grin. I mean, he was so good. He was so good.
You were asking about how guys got the role. So Dennis came in and auditioned. He really, really wanted to play Gordo Cooper. And somehow I was left alone for his audition with a camera. Bob Chartoff had left. I don't think Tony was there, and I didn't really know exactly how to run the camera. So I was playing around with it, and Dennis said, I got a camera like that. I've been in Europe or around the world, and you just press that button, and that's it. So I did a thing with Dennis, and it was like a phenomenal take that he did. And then he left. And then Bob Chartoff and maybe Tony came back, and I said, I got the guy. This guy is great. Let me show it to you. And I pressed the button. It's blank. Dennis told me the wrong button to press. So we got Dennis back. He did another take. It wasn't nearly as good. He'd done the magic take. Yeah. But how lucky do you get? You get young Dennis Quaid. And then, of course, when Ed Harris walked in, Bob Chartoff said, that's John Glenn. He looks just like John Glenn. And the actresses, too. We tend to think about The Right Stuff as being a guy's movie. But for me and for us, it was, we tried to emphasize even more than the book, the idea that there was a subtext of The Right Stuff. Maybe the wives who were not getting the recognition, who had to, be at home, where, as I think Pamela Reed's character says, how many women think when their husband goes to the office every day, there's a 35% chance they won't come back alive.
Yeah.
And just Veronica Cartwright, who at one point said, I couldn't make another movie. She'd been in Invasion of the Body Snatcher. I couldn't make another movie without her. She was just such a terrific actress. And she says, somehow they're talking about men, and she says, sometimes, men are such assholes. And somebody says, but they're handy assholes.
Oh, my God. I love that line. She delivers so many great lines in the movie. No, Jackie. Leia's so the best.
And, Mary Jo Deschanel, who was Caleb's wife. And Tony could probably tell you, we interviewed dozens, if not hundreds of, actresses who could play Annie Glenn. We couldn't find anyone. And one interview after another, and suddenly looked over my shoulder one day, and there was Mary Jo sort of sitting there because she was there with Caleb. And we were friends. I realized she had been an actress. She is, still an actress. She's a playwright. She's all of these things now. But I said, Mary Jo, come over here and sit in front of the camera here. I want you to be Annie Glenn. I want to see what you would do with it. And right away, there was the magic there. She just had it. And I cast her in the movie, and she just had a luminous, fragile, tragic, heroic quality that I thought was great for Annie Glenn. And she was just great.
She did have like a luminous thing. Yeah. When you finally put together a cut, did you have support? Did your studio, were they excited? What was the reaction? Well,
yeah, we spent a lot of time editing because, there's a whole story about how we finally did the special effects. We couldn't do, it took about a year to develop those. I think once the film was put together and we started screening it, we got pretty much unanimous rave reviews. I mean, everybody pretty much loved the movie. It was long and so forth.
Yeah.
But we had this conflict in a way as to how the film should be released. Really before the time of total wide release and so forth. But the Ladd Company, great guys, really smart and so forth, but they made a decision that the film should be released in October in about 6 or 8 theaters, platformed, and then go wide after the reviews came out and so forth. That scared me. Irwin Winkler, I know, wanted to go at Christmas time, and a film about Tarzan, what was it called? Greystoke, fell out.
Sure.
Fell out at Christmas, and Warner's had a place where they could have released it in 1,000 theaters. But Laddie had this idea of platforming. They had this thing, which was a great idea. Let's go to the Kennedy Center. We'll make this an important film. We'll set it up, and everybody in Washington, D.C. will come and see this film about the origins of the space program. And in the sky, somebody's going to arrange the entire history of air flight. There'll be early airplanes flying over, and then jets, and followed by the space shuttle. The sky will be filled with this great air show that fly over the Kennedy Center. And this was, the planned thing for giving it the grand release. And they had also said the banks of the Potomac will be lined by 1 million people watching the air show. It'll be grand opening.
Oh my God.
So comes the day at the Kennedy Center, and we're up on the roof, and Gareth says, well, we can't get the rights to the airspace, and we can't get all those airplanes, and we can't get the space shuttle. And so, like, way off in the distance, there are like 2 planes flying over, not even like they do over a ball game where
Yeah.
I look down at the Potomac, and there's like 2 guys with fishing rods. And that was sort of like, what's going on here? And so anyway, that approach did not work. But inside the theater, we went down, and it was packed with all the Washington luminaries and so forth. And I'm sitting in a row, and down at the middle of the row is Henry Kissinger, and he's sitting there, and I slide out, and I go up to the projection room, and Mark Berger, who mixed the film, is up there. And I said, let's jack up the sound, the bass rumble. I want to see those chins on Kissinger rattle when the rockets take off. The whole floor shake. And sure enough, Mark amped up the sound, and I looked down the row, and the whole theater's shaking, and Kissinger's chins are rattling away, and everybody. I mean, the film was totally well received and got basically great reviews everywhere. It ran in Paris for 5 years.
Oh my God.
It was released only in 6 or 8 theaters. I said, you got to sell this as Sam Shepard, and this is Yeager in a leather jacket. You've got to, this is the heroism, the secret sauce, the secret stuff. And they said, no, we want guys in silver suits. I said, that's not, well, of course, a couple years later, somebody made a film. I think they even asked me to do it, called Top Gun, about guys in leather jackets. That was the way to sell the movie. That was, and
right.
They did not do it that way. And after it opened, we had a meeting, and somebody said, well, Phil was right. What do we do now? But it was too late. You can't go back. You can't put the toothpaste back in the tube. And so, we do the best that we can to make the movie. And we're in the hands of people whose advice we have to trust. And they're not always right. And studios often they have the chance to make 10 movies, and if one big one succeeds and 9 fail, they can still show a profit, or that used to be the way it worked. But we as filmmakers, it's one and done. If it's not successful, everybody circles around. Who do we blame? Sometimes it's the actor. Sometimes they'll say, we cast it wrong, or she wasn't right, and without going into specifics, many cases of who gets blamed for the lack of success. And as I say, people are always circling around, trying to protect their asses and running back to Hollywood saying, the guy's improvising, and it wasn't me.
That's right. That's right.
I mean, it sounds like the voice is coming out of San Quentin. I didn't do it. I'm innocent. They made the wrong choice. Right Stuff didn't go wide for 3 months.
Wow.
And that was the platforming idea. But if it had gone wide, whether it would have been a huge hit or not, who knows? I mean, Star Wars surprised people, I think.
Yeah.
You don't really know. You're often surprised by how well a film does or how well it doesn't. We just have to do the best we can do. And if you put your heart and soul into something, and, you just hope the marriage will work.
And, I think you now know that it was worth every sort of moment. And it is a film that has so withstood the test of time and is such a tremendous work of art and story and character and theme. And it's, it's just one of those great, great films. And so, Phil, everything you said, I'm like literally taking to heart. I've written some of these things down, and it was such an honor to talk to you about this. I mean, like, you've just blown my mind.
Well,
so thank you for taking the time with us.
Thank you, Daniela.
They were called test pilots, and no one knew their names.
Bex, what a storyteller that Phil Kaufman is, huh?
Wow. I mean, when he was like, I'm just going to read you something, and then launched into this incredible story.
Oh my God, his writing, it's just amazing.
It was pretty special. I was also very impressed by his memory. I mean, this was a while ago, and he remembered so many details about, from start to finish, optioning it and fighting with the studios and finding the cast and fighting to get the right cast, and then through the marketing. Like, it's just very impressive how much he remembered about this whole process.
I didn't even get to ask him about like his process about, how he shot on set. But the thing I noted about him is that he has a very dry sense of humor, and he's able to sort of like, in telling that story about Sam Shepard, it was both dramatic and hilarious. And I found that to be the case with the film.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. And I think there's something running through all of these kind of legendary classic movies that we have been talking about in this podcast. And that it really is this mix of levity and lightness, but then drama just done really well, and a story told really well.
Yeah.
And, even going back to what we said about The Fighter and that, the humor that's in there, that's surprising. And so I agree with you. And I think that's really kind of a maker of classic films, because life is about both. And I think you can't effectively tell a story without both of those elements, but it's hard to do them well.
That's right. There's these two characters in the film played by Jeff Goldblum and Harry Shearer, and they're kind of tasked with finding the guys who are going to be the astronauts who are sent into space, which is, essentially at that time could have been a suicide mission. And so they sort of have to go all around America, and they first ask Yeager, and he's like, no, I'm not going to be a monkey in a tin can. But they were like a Rosencrantz and Guildenstern. I mean, just hilarious, bumbling idiots who just looked ridiculous next to the cowboys that were Chuck Yeager and all these other test pilots. And I just was like, you could have so easily done this film in a way that was just entirely earnest and about like, you know, the wives potentially losing their husbands every day and, you know, and have no sense of levity or humor at all. But I think it's that stuff that makes it's the right stuff. It's that combination that really but it's that combination that really makes the film so watchable over and over and over again. And I think you're right. It's something that we've been noting a lot, particularly with the dramas that we've chosen to examine.
Yeah.
You know, the other thing that I was just kind of like gobsmacked by is, you know, tossing William Goldman out of the project. I mean, the only thing I can compare it to do today would be like telling Aaron Sorkin to like that his script wasn't good. You know what I mean? Like he was that level of writer at that time, and Phil just sort of had such a sense of what the film should be, and the idea that it was going to be sort of this like overly patriotic, maybe slightly jingoistic version of the story maybe was just less true. You know, that wasn't what Tom Wolfe had painted in his book. And so I love that he was just kind of like, that's not the real story. That's a version, you know, with the astronauts just like shooting up into space. And that's great. But actually, if I'm going to direct it, I think it should be more representative of what Tom Wolfe wrote. And I thought that was really brave and obviously paid off in spades. You know, the movie, I think, again, sort of stands the test of time because there is that sort of level of honesty to the story. So that was very impressive to me. Just makes me want to be brave, you know?
Yeah, it's incredible.
Yeah, sure is. In fact, I'm about to hop right over to set right now, loyal listeners. So I think that was a great one, Bex. Why don't you do the wrap up, because you're really on a roll with it these days, and you don't forget anything like I do.
I try. Well, thank you for listening, everyone. Please continue to listen, and please like and subscribe to our channel. Please follow us on Instagram at Stay Gold Features and DM us with any questions, comments, concerns, or any suggestions you have of movies or producers for us to interview. Keep listening and stay gold.
Stay gold, guys.